Welcome, heathens. What's going on? Welcome to another episode of the Heavy Metallurgy Album Club. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Marty. Nice to see you. And we got Jim down here. What's going on, Jim? How you doing, man?
Doing good, man. As usual, nothing new to report. I had fun over the long weekend. Took my kid to Hollywood Studios because it's close to here, for Disney and all that. And to my surprise, he likes Tower of Terror the best, man. I was like, yes.
What is it?
Huh?
What is Tower of Terror?
Is that what you're in now?
If you haven't been, it's like a Twilight Zone type ride. It's kind of got Rod Serling in it and stuff. You go up in this elevator thing in this old hotel, and it like jumps up and down really fast, and it's pretty, and like it's open to the outside, and it's really creepy. It's really kind of scary, because freaks you out, but it's fun, man. I've run it tons of times. I just didn't think he was going to dig it, so that was fun. We had a good day that day. That was cool.
Awesome.
Hard to keep your lunch down when you do that.
Yeah, exactly.
The Vomitron. What you been spinning?
Okay, so a little bit of Ore Noir here. Out to Die. Black Thrash awesomeness. You guys know these guys. Good stuff.
Oh no!
I never did get their first one, man, but I need to get that Black Thrash Attack, the first one. I really like that one too.
Hades Rise is my favorite.
Cool,
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, I bet they're all good.
Good.
I do have Hades Rise on CD, but I don't have Black Thrash Attack. Anyway, also, I just felt like a little bit of Mental Funeral, a little bit of Twisted Massive, Burnt Decay, and got in the mood for that, so that was good.
Never gets old.
Never gets old.
Never gets old.
Classic.
And since you mentioned Dark Funeral last week, I kind of put that on my brain, so a little bit of Secrets of the Black Arts also never gets old. So, yep, those are my three for this week. How about you guys?
All right, Ben, how you doing? What's been going on?
Pretty good. I don't have really much to report. I've been doing a lot of yard work and listening to this album quite a bit. Feeling good. I haven't really had a lot of listening time, so it's been mostly occupied by this Necrophobic album, but feeling the death metal still. This thing is kind of the most recent thing to re-kick my ass, I guess, but y'all know this Ceremony, the Days Before the Death EP?
Mm-mm.
It's kind
I've seen that cover before. It's very uninspiring. Wouldn't jump out of a rack at me for sure.
Right, but it totally rules. It came out on Hammerheart, and Steve Tucker was in this band before he joined Morbid Angel.
Oh, okay.
It's just an EP, but God, it's punishing stuff. And then old 80s Swedish band Obscurity. It's got a bootleg with their demos on it. It's just killer late thrash, just got a little more aggressiveness and simplicity to it that something about that is just really connecting with me. It's kind of like proto black metal, proto death metal, but it's just mean thrash at its core. Excellent stuff. And then like Scattered Remnants, Inherent Perversion. Now this is the kind of stuff that back in the 90s I just thought, this is just death metal. It's boring. Everything sounds like this kind of death metal, but my buddy Steve played this in one of his videos not too long ago and reminded me how absolutely sick this is. It's a lot of diverse ideas, but it's just heavy as all shit. A lot of incantation kind of stuff, a lot of kind of brutal stuff. That's not slammy. It's not really gimmicky or anything. It's just excellent. All this band stuff is absolutely crushing. I guess so. Yeah, a couple of EPs mostly.
Nice. All right. Well, here over in the Heavy Metallurgy bunker, Kellen and his wife Corinne have been visiting since last Wednesday. They went home today, so I've been hanging out with Kellen and Corinne and went record shopping, and been a good time. Been a good time seeing them. And things I've been listening to, only a couple things. Haven't been in the shop much this week, but Angel Corpse Exterminate. Oh my God. I was listening to this.
So good.
I was listening to Darkside on Spotify, and one of the songs that came up after the album was done was Into the Storm of Steel, which is, oh my God, that song is just absolutely so crushingly great. So I'm like, well, I'm listening to that album for the rest of the week, and I have been. I haven't spun this in a long time. Whenever I listen to Angel Corpse, it's always Hammer of Gods for some reason. I don't know. I've always loved that record, but I forget how good the other two were. But this one, man, it's so good. Into the Storm of Steel. Oh, God, blisteringly awesome.
And I have listened to The Inexorable and that one 100 times over for everyone. I've listened to Hammer of the Gods. I've probably listened to Hammer of the Gods like 5 times.
I don't know if it's because I saw them the most during that era. I don't know, but I've always dug it. And I just got this one in finally. This is going to be on my year-end list. Converging Parallel Worlds by Belgium's Throne of Thorns. This is on Rock of Angels label. This is proggy power metal. I'm supposed to be doing a review on this, and I had a cataclysmic teleprompter failure, and I lost everything I wrote. And I've been so pissed off about it. I haven't, but I've started again. I'm hoping to do it this week. Why do you guys still buy CDs instead of streaming? Because
troll in the chat.
We're all old. We buy media. I stream. I do stream. I enjoy the convenience of it, but at the end of the day, I want to own it. I just do. If I like it, I want to own it. Well then, yeah. I get it. I get why people are going to it, but it just feels weird to me to not have the product. But anyway, yep, Throne of Thorns. It's really good power metal. There's two types of power metal. There's a super cheesy, and then there's a not. These guys are the not cheesy. They're leaning a little bit more into the prog stuff. There's a lot more keyboards, but it's not like proggy to the point where you're wearing a sweater or anything like that. It's like just really well done, really well composed. Excellent singer. He's not a high-pitched singer. He's more mid-range, but excellent. I enjoy it. But we have gathered here today because Jim picked the second album, came out in 1997 by Sweden's Necrophobic. The album is called Darkside. And a little bit of info on the band before we get rolling on this. The band was formed in 1989 by drummer Joachim Sterner and now deceased guitarist David Blackmoon Parland. It is believed that the band named themselves after a Slayer song from the 1986 seminal album Rain and Blood. The pair played with a revolving door lineup of musicians until the permanent addition of bassist Tobias Sidgard. The addition occurred prior to recording their debut 7-inch single, The Call, in early 1992. They got Anders Strokkirk on vocals for this absolute bona fide banger of an album. And then there was some lineup changes, which we're going to get up in here in a minute. But Jim, you picked it, so we're going to start with Ben first. What was your first impression of Darkside?
I feel like I always answer this the same way. Back in 1997, my buddy was just driving around playing me metal just to get me into stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, you like Dissection? Check this out. This guy, Dissection guy, plays on this record." And he put on Nailing the Holy One, and I was just flipping my stuff. I was like fully realizing myself as an atheist at that time. And it felt like the most rebellious thing I'd ever done in my life was to listen to Nailing the Holy One. And I could feel that blasphemy coursing through my veins. And that's one of those moments that I've just chased, trying to get that to happen again for so many years. So I've always been totally endeared to this album for that experience. I love the album more for that experience than I do the album itself. So we'll talk about the ins and outs of the music, but like that right there for me was like, that's all I need to love this band and this album. So that's my first experience. Yeah, we'll just go from there.
Right on. Well, for me, I bought it when it came out because I was very much in love with this thing, the Nocturnal Silence. This album, I love it. This is when they were a little bit more death metal leaning. And I love the riffs on here. I love the songs on here. When I got this one, I didn't do any of the research what was going on in the band at the time. I'm just taking it at face value, and it sounded to me like this album, which makes sense because David Parland left Necrophobic to be in Dark Funeral on the Secrets of the Black Arts and the EP. But Parland wrote a lot of the songs on this here. So you're hearing that as I stated in the intro to this thing, that the black metal wave was rolling over Scandinavia. It's 1987. It's just the way it was. And if you weren't a black metal band, you were starting to adjust your sound a little bit to embrace that, which, ultimately this is a really good album. I just wanted more of Nocturnal Silence, but I got more Dark Funeral instead. But, first impression, good. I enjoyed it. It's good. I haven't listened to it in a very long time, so spinning it a bunch this week, it was cool to reconnect, and I think my opinions on it are a little bit different than they were then. But yeah, Jim, what was your first impression?
I was a late bloomer to Necrophobic because my first time I heard about them was when that one singer imprisoned his wife and daughter, and when he was high on crack or something. And
Yep.
And I was just like, I don't need to hear that or whatever. But eventually heard them, and immediately fell in love with it, and I found out that guy was like the mid era, which isn't this great anyway. But anyway, these first two albums of theirs are my favorite. Nocturnal Silence and Darkside. Yeah, love these. I think they're awesome. Man, I listened to Secrets of the Black Arts this week after you made that comment last week. I don't hear it, man.
I may have to put them. I had back and forth, but yeah,
I think these bands sound totally different. I know Parland wasn't both, but when I hear just punishing black metal on Dark Funeral, and I hear melodic black and death metal on Darkside. But we're coming to my question, which I guess we should go ahead and roll into, right?
Sure.
So there definitely was some cross-pollination in the Swedish scene at that time. We've got, Storm of the Light Spain dissection in 95. We've got Sacramentum, Far Away from the Sun, 96. And then we've got this album in 97. So, definitely, black metal tinged death metal, melodic specifically, and its approach, with acoustic guitars throughout, some synths throughout, the sort of like that black metal waltz appears here and there across from the punishing double bass and faster tempos. So, my question is what do you think about what sort of caused that sort of combination of death metal and black metal where those genres in their earliest years were just completely at odds, there was this huge demarcation line between black metal and death metal, and these bands, Necrophobic, Dissection and Sacramentum,
Dawn is another one,
really melded these two genres, I think, perfectly. So what do you guys think was the impetus for that?
Ben?
I think by that time, 91 was the heyday for Scandinavian death metal, American death metal, Floridian death metal. But I think by, 93, 94 or so, people were like, we should try and change it up. Try something else that isn't brutal, fast, aggressive, and see what we can think of. And I'm sure all those bands kind of wanted to reach back and try and find some way of lengthening or adding more intellect to the Venom kind of stuff, and Merciful Fate kind of stuff, and make it darker. So I think that was probably the idea. Let's step away from the aggression and the intensity, because that's there's a finite amount of that you can add to an album and still have, a good listenable time. So let's go back and add some of that darkness that Merciful Fate had and Venom and stuff, and see if we can just kind of, stir them up, make a twister cone out of it. And black metal was super fun back in the 80s and the 90s. So maybe it felt like a unfinished idea that they keep on merging in with the black metal or the death metal.
Welcome, Estrella. I haven't seen you here before. Welcome. Right on. Well, for me, I think it's interesting how, I mean, Sweden kind of got it right. They really kind of walked the line between that melodic death and the black, like you said, Sacramentum, Dissection. You know, I've always thought of Dissection as a melodic death metal band, always have.
Yeah.
And but John himself would say, no, we're black metal. But I don't know.
No, he didn't. He said they were metal of death, satanic metal of death.
He told Dan Swano he wanted to be black metal. And then he went and did the black, which was totally black metal. But anyway, I really, where Norwegian black metal had more depth to it, more atmosphere to it, the Swedes really got it right with just really more singular, less layered, but very melodic and fast and speedy and tight sounding. You had Unisound, Dan Swano producing. You had, I know Ben is not a fan of Peter's Studio Abyss sound, but I mean, that was a thing. He helped tighten that up. Those two, and then of course Studio Sunlight, which was this recorded Studio Sunlight? Yeah. Yes, it was.
Skogsberg.
Yeah, those three big producers, those three big studios really kind of putting a stamp on Swedish black/death metal. And I think the logical progression. You're right though, Jim. Initially there was like the death metal guys didn't want nothing to do with the black metal. The black metal wanted to be far away from the death metal. But when the two unite, I think the Swedes really kind of proved that it's magic. It could be something really great, especially Dissection, especially Sacramentum, Far Away from the Sun. And Necrophobic too. I mean, they were kind of a weird cross of the two on Nocturnal Silence, their debut, leaning a little bit more on the melodic death, but they kind of embraced it on Darkside. It worked. But I think that for them, this was a transitional record. Parlin's not in the band anymore. They're kind of continuing on with a lot of his material. Yeah, and Dawn, another great one. Slaughter Sun, Crown of the Triarchy. What a great. It's long. It's a one song too long, but it crushingly awesome melodic black death, whatever. But I mean, this is a band in flux. They went through a lineup change. They got a different singer. Their Anders Strokerk is out, and you got their bass player Tobias doing vocals. So there's a bit of a change, but it still kind of feels like Necrophobic because you got Parlin's riffs, but they're stylistically more black. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I just think it was a good logical evolution, and it's since the Swedish death metal, the melodic side, it was so melodious that adding a little bit of black metal dissonance in with it just seems to fit. It seems to make sense. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I think that, when you're, I mean, for me anyway, I'm going to speak from my own personal experience and try to avoid a complete generalization, but definitely when I first started playing music, like it was like, it's thrash or death, you know what I mean? Like, everything else sucks, and, I was stuck into like, and in my world, like, it was just like thrash was the heaviest thing, you know what I mean? It was really more of a European thing to say death or black metal at the time in like 87 or whatever, 88, at least in Lower Alabama. As you progress as a musician, like you want to do different things. So I think maybe like, even though it can be argued that Euronymous was older for sure. I think most of you are like wanting to like, wall yourself off from other like, aspects of your, genre, which in this case, we're all talking about different forms of extreme metal. That comes from like youth, and like, it's easier to be super closed-minded than open-minded.
Yeah.
And maybe, and what it is though, is you progress as a musician, you're like, well, that is kind of cool, that is kind of great. And so I think that the musicians in these bands here that, have similar sounds, are had that sort of awakening early on. Like, yeah, man, black metal and death metal, they're both cool. We're talking about Satan, we're bringing in these atmospheres. You know, we're bringing in killer riffs and killer leads. You know, we can do all this. We can merge these two. You know, and whether or not it was conscious, like I think it's just it's a progression of your musicianship. You know, but you know what's great about, you know, when I listen to these records, though, is that they didn't really dilute the best aspects of either of these genres. Like I really feel like Sacramentum, you know, Dissection, and on this album, Necrophobic, you know, like really took the greatest parts of those and really made it a great, like, perfect amalgamation of the two genres. You know, and so you know that said, you got other great points, Marty. Like, you know, Parlin, has his hands all over this record. He does I'm looking at the notes here. He does the second lead on track 1 and plays the acoustic guitar on it. Notvite
does
some lead vocals on the 8th track.
Yeah, Nailing the Holy One. He does all the vocals, all the lead vocals.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, that's another thing. These guys are like, you know, jumping on each other's records and all that. And so, you know, that, I mean, all of us have been playing in bands for a long time. You know, like when you're playing shows with the same bands over and over, and you're in the same genre, like a little bit of their riffs come into your world, a little of your riffs go into theirs, you know, at least that was definitely my experience. So I think it was a combination of all those things. I think it was a combination of them all realizing that both, you know, black metal and death metal had things to say. They could definitely say them together really well. And also just like, you know, internal collaboration and internal competition, you know, in the same country. And it ended up making, you know, 3 of my favorite records from that era. Yeah. I mean, I love Far Away from the Sun. I love Storm of the Light's Bane, you know, and I love this album, Darkside. And, you know, most of the material from those bands just in general. So I'm glad, for whatever the reason was, whether it was a, you know, combination of all the things that the 3 of us have just mentioned, or something entirely different that had them, you know, really decide to kind of, you know, sew these sounds together in a really awesome way. I'm just super grateful for it, because, you know, I'll never get tired of any of these records.
And you have to keep in, you know, kind of touched on this, but Sweden's a small country and a very niche, small scene. Even though it seems like a million bands come from Sweden, they're so cross-pollinated. One guy leaves one band, he joins another one. I mean, I play a certain way, and where I go, my stamp is going to be on it. You know, it's just going to, and I can see why there's a little bit of similarity between some of the bands, because they all share members, you know, it's just the way it goes. But good topic. Good question. I don't know if we answered it here. Maybe, I think we did, but
more or less.
Let's discuss the musicality and composition of Darkside. Good one, Jim, by the way. Ben.
Me. Well, so here's where I veer off from my memory of listening to Nailing the Holy One for the first time. I think it's kind of formulaic. I was noticing upon maybe my 8th listen or so of this one, I was like, this sounds like Dissection without the lead guitars. It's just kind of like rhythm, and then they'll kind of double over it with some slight harmonization.
It's Dissection without the triumph.
Yeah.
There's not the triumphant, like, oh, I'm on a mountain. I'm on a mountain with no shirt going.
Notvite would write the most elaborate melodic passages that were just like stories within each other. And I just felt like this is like an empty version of that. And I felt like they were maybe going for it. Like we said, cross-pollination. There's a lot of, it's inevitable that this is going to sound like a lot of country mates. That's exactly what was going on at the time. So I think the formula is kind of like similar to that. But then I think what's really unique about this album in particular, and I can't really speak to the rest of Necrophobic's discography, I'm not super familiar with it. I think what kind of makes them put their name on their sound is the drumming is kind of like that Left-Hand Path kind of sound, where he starts with the kick drum rather than the snare. It's like one beat off sometimes. That, to me, it's just like I get bothered by hearing that. It just feels like out of sync for me. It feels like, okay, I get it at first. It's like you're tumbling down a hill and you're about to fall over, and it's like, oh shit, I'm going to. But for me, I need something to click back into place and be groovy or just not that. It's like he's as out of the pocket as he can be or something. I can't really put my finger on exactly what it is, but there's something about that beat that reminds me exactly of Left Hand Path, and it just sounds like it's wrong in the way that you're trying to make it to bother me, so that it seems more extreme. But the drummer in me is driven nuts. So there's that, and I feel like that and the kind of dissection rhythm is like exactly what this sounds like to me. So it's fun. It makes for a really good listen. I'm pretty happy that the album is kind of just around like 30 minutes or so if you take out the piano stuff. I think it could have kind of overstayed its welcome if it were like a 50-minute album or something like that. But it definitely gets in and out like it ought to. Doesn't really mince about any moments. It doesn't really drag down at all. But the weirdest thing that sticks out for me every time I put it on is, why does the first track end the way it does? Do you guys notice that? It just seems like it just goes out. Like compositionally to me,
I guess it didn't bother me. It didn't jump out at me. Yeah.
It's like 2.5 minutes long. And like there's some kind of short songs on here, yeah, granted, but that's not, it just sounds like it isn't done. It's 2 minutes and 50 seconds long, and I don't know, maybe I'm just not following the whole thing about it, but it just feels like that's it. You're like halfway there.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, Swano remastered. Swano, everything Swano does is great.
Yeah. I wish there was a full length for Darkside. Man, that was so good. Not this album, but Swano's one song project on a split 7-inch with Infested. But anyway, Jim, your thoughts on musicality and composition?
I definitely hear what Ben's saying. I think that, this is sort of like the blue collar version of the high-minded Storm of the Lightsbane,
which is still a good thing.
Yeah. I mean,
the Dollar General version.
You're not digging deep in the lyrical department when
the lyrics are bad.
Like Bloodthirst, it's F your God. I mean, that one's super okay. It's low hanging fruit there from the blasphemy tree. There's no eloquence in your Satanism right there. I mean, it's pretty in your face, pretty concrete.
There's no studying satanic theology. It's like, my buddy's a Satanist and I am too, I guess. That's
you got, this is not Where Dead Angels Lie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, that's part of what I think separates this, like, gives this more identity, of its own individual identity. Because otherwise, if it had gone to, like, if they had been, lyrically capable or even, musically as capable as John, like, I think that it would have been not discernible from Dissection, but these guys are, and I think, coming more from a death metal sensibility than John was, or even Parlin was, and on this record. And so that's that sort of approach, that's sort of like more like, tank coming through kind of attitude. Like, that's kind of what makes, I think, this album, what it is and what separates it. It still has darkness. It still has, like, that sort of like a, reverb drenched guitar sound, reverb on the vocals that kind of like, gives you that sort of like evil fog, that you hear. I think that I hear when I listen to either of these three albums that I alluded to earlier. But like, this is definitely, the guys, getting really drunk in the backyard.
Try not to fall into the fire.
Yeah. But having said, but I love it for that, and it's, the solos here are still actually really good. The bass player does a lot of the solos on this record, which is kind of weird, and I think he does a great job. You know what I mean? He's and having to kind of step into Parlin's shoes and whatnot. So like, yeah, I definitely feel like this is more of a sort of like an in your face melodic Black Death metal album, And I mean, and also, nailing the Holy One. I mean, I think the lyrics for that, John was singing on it, but I think the lyrics are actually written by the drummer. So yeah, these are guys that are just, nailing the Holy One.
Guys, I've got a great idea for a song. Run with it, bro. Run with it.
And but yeah, so yeah, that's I think that I still really like how all of the instrumentation comes together. And I like the drummer style. I watched getting ready for this week. I watched a live performance of Nailing the Holy One, and and it was really tight, man. I mean, they pull it off live like it sounds on the record. So I totally get what Ben's saying, but I think that's kind of it's what makes Necrophobic what they are. And on this record, though, they change a lot, throughout their career. I mean, they've altered a lot. Even the album after this, what's it, the third
Antichrist?
Antichrist, yeah, sounds a lot different from this. And but you can
good.
still, I love that record.
Yeah, Blood Hymn's good too.
That Straight Line, it's an awesome album, but different from this one. So it's cool that they have their own identity. But yeah, the way that they kind of like where they choose to put in like the cool little bass runs, where they choose to put in the acoustics and the synths, I didn't there wasn't that moment where I felt like, that doesn't make sense here. Though I will say, to Ben's comment, like, okay, now listen to Nailing the Holy One, and it kind of sounds a little formulaic. Well, that's, even though I love that song, it actually I don't think fits very well in the album as a whole. You know what I mean? Like it kind of it's like kind of straight death metal. It's kind of it doesn't really seem to have the atmosphere. It's got a cool attack, but it's definitely like you start getting drunk out the back. He is the guy jumping in the fire. That's what this song is.
It's almost like the punk cover at the end of the album or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So, but yeah, that's my take on musicality composition.
And I'm going to have to side with Ben on this. I've listened to it this week after not hearing it for a long time, and I'm thinking it's very formula-based. And Parland, I mean, if you listen to the Nocturnal Silence, there's some cool, tricky riffs on there. Catchy, interesting. On here, they're like, okay, we're embracing the black metal aesthetic on here. They're Parland got really good at writing very simplistic riffs, but very catchy riffs. And that was kind of his thing. That's where you hear like the War project he did with a couple of the other guys. And then he had his own project called Black Moon. It only put out a few songs, and Infernal was another one that he did. You could hear his DNA in all this stuff. Real simplistic, but very catchy riffs. And I think it works. I mean, I can't say I listened to this album and I love it. It leaves a lot to be desired. I think it's a little front loaded, and I don't love, I like the idea of the instrumentals, but I think they're they don't strike me. They're not really there's not a lot of depth to it. I like the mood it's trying to convey, but I don't necessarily like how they're getting there. But for the most part, I like mostly the first half, and then of course that Nailing the Holy One. But I think it's a band trying to reset. You lost your singer, your guitar players who wrote most of your music is in another band that got bigger, ultimately got bigger than Necrophobic did. They're doing a reset. They scrambled around, some of the members to do different tasks, and they're a 3-piece on this thing with guests. And it's
probably
shows.
weird to have your guitar player like quit and then go in the studio and record all the songs that he wrote. Right? It's got to be kind of weird.
He only recorded on the first track. He did some acoustic guitar and some guitar on the first track.
He wrote a lot of the songs, and then he left, right?
Yeah. He wrote a bunch of the stuff.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. But hearing the third Antichrist and then Blood Hymns after that, this iteration of the band got better. In my opinion, this was a building block for them to move forward, shaking the change off and like, okay, here we are. We're on a new path. And their sound changes a little bit even there as well. They kind of like had to shake. We have to do this one sort of black metal album because that's kind of the winds. That's what's in the wind right now. But I think the album is largely decent. I do enjoy it. I wouldn't get rid of it. I like it. I just like what came before and what came after a bit better. Let's talk about production. Ben.
I mean, I am a lover of Sunlight Studios. I love that boxy guitar sound. I don't know, is it a JCM 9000 or something that it's like the token Sunlight?
Well, no, the Entomb sound was a PV Pacer in an isolation box with cranked up with a HM2 pedal, I think. I don't know.
I wonder, is it only in metal that like certain studios just come up with like a signature sound and crank out a bunch of albums that sound exactly alike and they're all great?
Yeah.
I always thought when I first got into metal, I was hearing Grave and I was hearing this and I was hearing Dismember and Entombed. And I was like, these are basically the same fucking thing, right? Why are you guys listening to the same album pretending they're different bands? This doesn't make sense to me. It makes sense because it's an addictive tone. You can't ever get sick of it.
I was blown away to hear that the Sunlight drum sound was D drums. I just learned that within the last 5 years and it blew my mind. I couldn't believe it.
Do you mean like electronic drums?
Electronic drums, D drums.
Huh. Well,
Fenris had to fight to get rototoms on Soulside Journey. Because Skogsberg's like, nope, you're using this kit. This is what you use. This is the sound of the studio. So yeah, the studio Sunlight is D drums.
Wow. I feel like Fenris would be the hardest guy to win an argument with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, speaking of the drum sound, I feel like the drum sound on most Skogsberg albums don't bother me, but on here particularly, the boxy snare it gets a little old after a while. There's something about it's even more boxy than usual. I don't know what it is, but it gets old after a while, and especially the way he just plays it. He's just like drives me a little nuts. Doesn't sound like a boxy snare. It sounds unreal. I almost getting into like Saint Anger kind of territory, but not quite that bad. Other than that, I think it's a glorious tone that can't get sick of at all. I feel like the vocal performance is a little monotonous. I don't know if that's a bad thing necessarily. On Nailing the Holy One, there's kind of a lot of different voices going on. And I think that's done adequately, but were a vocalist to be more, I don't know, I guess charismatic throughout the whole album, I can see it maybe needing to sound a little bit differently than it is. But I think on this album, it's just like, these are riffs. These are satanic riffs, total darkness. That's what you're going to hear. So
backyard drunkery.
Was that?
I love the backyard drunkery reference. I can't. That's perfect.
Yeah. It really was like a fist banging kind of death black metal album. It's got a lot of character to it. It's pretty unique for its time period. It just isn't. It's not a fantastic album by any means, but it sounds adequate. I think it's produced exactly how it ought to be. From a great studio. It just doesn't sound very unique, right?
Sure, agreed. Jim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I really like the production on this. It's the elements of it to kind of like link it as the obnoxious younger brother of Sacramentum and Dissection. Those connecting threads are like the reverb on the box, the vocals, the reverb on the guitars, the bass that's like, there, but kind of more of a sort of like a kind of a punky sound that like punches its way through the mix, but isn't like over present or on its low end. You know what I mean? It's definitely more of a high to mid kind of a sound. All of that sort of like, keeps it in that sort of like, mid-range EQ of a fog, kind of a sound. So it kind of contributes to it, though, of course you can never have too much distortion or low end. I'm always down for more of that. But the drums are sort of like, kind of right there, like just under the guitar in terms of levels. And I think it's a good place for this style. You don't want to like listen to a record like this that, despite the concrete notes of the lyrics, like it still has like it still has some atmosphere to it. So, you don't want to hear like Archspire type drum playing or drum sounds on this, because that would completely distract from like the overall effect, which is like the destruction of Christianity, which is the message. So I think that the choice here in the studio, kind of support, the overall intent of the sound. And, one of the things I really, there are two things that I kind of wrote down. And one of them is actually in line with what you said, Ben, like the snare is too loud. You know what I mean? I wrote that snare is too loud. It just needs to come down a little bit. Like the other drums themselves, like, and the bass, like I said, they're in alignment with the guitar, but the snare is not. I'm not sure what the choice was there, but that could have been pulled back in the mix. But besides that, there's just a great balance of the rest of the instrumentation. I don't feel like the vocals are too loud, and I don't feel like when the leads come on, they're like suddenly punched up real high and blare you out. So for the most part, with the exception of the snare, I thought it's they did really well in the studio, that all the choices sort of like kind of serve that melodic Black Death tonality that they were striving for. It's accomplished here, and I had no complaints about it, other than the snare. So.
And I'm with both you guys on this. I think compared to the debut, which I think sounds really good, the guitars are real raw, real in your face, kind of buzzsawed a little bit. And there's just more of an organic flow. I think on Darkside, they smoothed it out. They tried to go for the black metal aesthetic. It's tightened up. It's more smooth. The snare didn't even bother. I mean, nothing really jumped. When I listened to this, nothing jumped out at me as wrong. I mean, that usually the only time I can really comment on a production is when I don't like it. Because when something really sets you off and it really sticks with, or if you love it, like, wow, this sounds amazing, or this is just where it needs to be. Nothing really bugs me, sounds out of place. It sounds like a product of its era. It sounds like a product of its geographical location, of its scene. Yeah, I've got no real complaints at all on that. So I guess I'm going to leave it there. Least favorite songs. Jim, we'll start with you.
I Spawned by Evil, man. I need to feast on a human child.
Is this backyard blasphemy next to a kegger?
Backyard blasphemy next to a kegger, man.
Yeah, backyard kegger blasphemy. Yeah.
Needing to feast on a human child. Yeah, that is exactly what it is. He's doing a keg stand when he's screaming that line. I need to feast on a human child. I love it though, man. I love how the vocals in the beginning is like da, 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 da. Like it's like he's like machine gunning the vocal like as quickly as the first song ends, the second one begins, and he just like machine guns his vocal right at you, and I love that. Just every time Spawned by Evil comes on, like it would just crack me up, man, especially with that line. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like awesome and hilarious at the same time. And Bloodthirst, I'm a sucker for bands that quote like old Bible movies from the 50s, so let it be written, so shall it be done, So, yeah. Again, these guys weren't digging deep on my lyrics. And it is the same song with the F Your God in it, so Bloodthirst, it's crazy lyrics, but great eerie keys on that chorus. The keys, the keyboards and the synths on there like really add to the feel of the song. It's got a great mid-tempo vibe. Let's see, the call has if you pay attention to the riffs behind the leads in the call, like some of the best riffs on the record are played behind the leads, which is almost a shame a little bit. But I would, recommend anybody checking out the record to listen to the call, but like kind of make sure you pay attention when they're playing the leads and harmony solos, like what's going on with the riffing there, because it's really cool. And then there's that sort of kind of a cool, like simple, kind of quiet little bass intro that starts the song. It's like played with kind of a staccato feel and not distorted. It's clean, but it's kind of a nice sort of dynamic added here. For some, like least favorite, and it's not, and this is what is tough for me, because it's not that I don't like it. I really like Nailing the Holy One. I think it's a great song. It's also got some unintentionally hilarious lyrics, but 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 like I said earlier, like it just doesn't fit in with the vibe of the rest of the album to me. Like I feel like it kind of should have been a bonus track or something. Like, because the rest of it has this real like kind of like, dark melodic black metal fog feel to it. But then you hear that and it's just like straight death, satanic death metal. I'm sure they had a good time playing it, and writing it and have fun with it. And it is a good song, but it's just, when you really kind of get into the vibe of the record, especially with, one of the instrumentals is right before it. So you're already kind of in this like, sort of like, zoned out vibe, listen to this instrumental, and suddenly get hit over the head like a hammer with Nailing the Holy One. It's kind of a strange transition right there. So I think that, it would have been fine. I just wish it was kind of like, like a bonus track or something, and that we had more of, that sort of like, metal, like, Black Death thickness going on. And there was time to do it, because this is a very short record. It's 37 minutes, so I think they could have easily, switched that out. But yeah, favorite, Spawned by Evil, and least favorite, but only because it's on this record. Still a good song, and that's Nailing the Holy One.
All right, Ben.
So on one note, I noticed I wasn't able to find my copy of this on CD. I don't know, it's somewhere around here, I believe. But there's a bonus track on it called Nema that comes like 3 minutes after the last track. And I can't remember that. It's been a long time since I spun the CD, so I'm curious to hear it now. And it's not on Spotify where I was listening to this.
It's not listed on the original. It must be a reissue.
So the lyrics to it apparently were like some satanic chant that they looked up and sung backwards. So in line with the mentality that the rest of the record has lyrically for it.
Satan.
I feel like Christian Slaughter, the last track, is probably my favorite, just a hair above Nailing the Holy One for the experience that I had when I was a young lass. Christian Slaughter is the longest song on the album, and I feel like that's where they really kind of show their potential for writing a more elaborate song, what I wanted them to do more of. I felt like they could have, if they would have written more songs like that last track, more elaborate ideas, they could have ditched the intros and outros and like the more shorter ideas and had maybe something more along the lines of Storm of the Light's Bane. But then you run into the problem of it sounding too much like that great album. So I'm sure that wasn't something they were interested in doing. I think they were more trying to keep a grip on the brutality of death metal and merge it with the darkness of black metal. So that might not have been something they wanted to do. But I really do like how the last song has more breathing room in it, more ideas floating around, and it doesn't just hop about on that pogo stick kind of snare beat that kind of drives me nuts for the rest of the album. So that's my favorite. Least favorite, the first song just always pisses me off. How it's a good song, but it's just like, what? That's it? Over? Okay, it's weird. So that's why I'm picking those.
All right. Well, for me, I'll get into the negative first. Bloodthirst. Bloodthirst to me is a track that de-escalates the album by loping along under a mid-pace plod. Feels like getting stuck behind a driver doing 35 in a 55 mile per hour speed zone. Mediocre riffs do little to inject excitement on this one. The way the album ends, Niflhel, the third and final instrumental on the album. It's a over 4 minute long instrumental. It meanders, goes nowhere interesting for me. It's too long, and the other two instrumentals are a little shorter and just kind of like a pit stop. This here, they kind of, okay, we're going in on this one, and it just seems so, it just seems so flatline and doesn't really do much of excitement on here. And then Christian Slaughter, I must be listening to a different song than you guys. The track starts with some fury, but for a closing track, this possesses a very predictable formula and structure. The verse riffs, we've heard it all before, a bit better elsewhere. The song isn't terrible, just sounds like it was made late in the album process and lacks enthusiasm. You know, just as you're writing a bunch of music for an album, you get down towards the end of it, it's like you're coming up with these riffs and like, is this even good anymore? You know, it's like, is this anything? You know, and it takes sometimes some time to get away from it to hear if you like it or not. But favorites, I do like the way the album starts. I think Black Moon Rising, Spawned by Evil. Spawned by Evil, they put out a mini CD with that song on it, so that must be the single for the album with some covers on it. It's a great song. Black Moon Rising, I do like the energy in it. Darkside's a good song. Nailing the Holy One, John Nodvite on lead vocals. Excellent urgency and energy on this track. A ferocity I wish more of the album possessed. So, I mean, I get you, Jim. It's a good song, but it is kind of dissimilar from it's like way more clenched fist, swing, 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 swing. I'm going to hit something. But really stupid lyrics, man. They're dumb. They're really dumb lyrics. But yeah, I mean, I have no real complaints. There's a few things here bug me, but as a whole, it's still a good album. Judgment. Final thoughts, Ben.
Sorry, I'm not as I haven't slept as much as usual. I think it's fun. I think it's a great timepiece for what it is. I have a couple of gripes about it that aren't really anything significant. I need to check out the previous album more. I own it. When I got it, I was just like, this sounds just like Slayer. I don't know. Didn't really do much for me, but so like it's not one of my favorite bands by any means, but they're a great band. This is a great album. Sorry. But yeah, it's just got a couple of things. I think it could have been a great album if they would have had more, maybe if Parliament had stayed with them for a little bit longer and like really recorded with it and like written a little bit more elaborate songs or something. It feels like it's got those instrumentals kind of jammed in to make it a little bit longer. It's just got some kind of awkward problems with it that aren't great, but it still stands the test of time. And like the Sunlight Studios tonality, you just can't get enough of it really. So I would maybe give it like a 7.3 out of 10 or so.
0.3. Yep. Yeah. Jim.
For the longest time, out of the first three, which the third Antichrist being the third one, big surprise. I thought I liked Darkside the best, and then this week listening to this a lot more, kind of pinging it back with Nocturnal Silence and all that. I do think Nocturnal Silence and Third Antichrist are better albums. But I still really like this one though. Like these three records I play all the time. I won't say all the time, but I mean I don't play anything all the time because I'm like every other collector scum. We listen to 100,000 things. But I will say that I come back to these more often than a lot of other records, and so that's saying something. And so I still really like Darkside, and I even like some of the new Necrophobic stuff, but that's sort of like youthful exuberance and energy and throwing their friends into the fire when they're drunk kind of attitude. I feel like it's kind of missing from today's Necrophobic. And when I listen to this stuff, it's there and full of force. All the warts and all, and so warts and all, this record is it's an A for me. I really like it that much. Though I will say that if you're new to Necrophobic, you probably want to check out the Third Antichrist if you want something more straightforward, and if you want something just more brutal, Nocturnal Silence is a great debut. But this is a good sort of like annoying little brother for Storm of the Lights, Bane, Dissection, and Far Away from the Sun, Sacramento. I mean, these three albums came out like right in line, 95, 96, 97. Shared some members, shared some songwriters, even shared colors on their covers.
Shared artists, same artist, yeah.
There's a lot going on here, and so it's if you like those other two records, you're going to like this. Though I do think you won't like this one as much. You know what I mean? But it's still there. It's got its own attitude, and so I think Darkside can still hold its head high. You know, after getting over the hangover the next day.
All right. Well, for me, I don't disagree with either. I think this is a good product of its time. There's other bands at this point that I prefer, but for a Swedish black metalish fix, it works really well. Like Jim said, I do prefer the debut. I do prefer the album and the album after that over this one. For me, this is a C+, B- record. B- depending on my mood, more likely a C+, which still a passing grade. Again, if someone put it on at a party, I'd be cool, you know, do a little air guitaring, you know, whatever. But there's a reason why I haven't touched it in a long time, and I'm reminded why, because it's again a band in flux, a band trying to figure out a new direction, a new cast of songwriters. So yeah, it was very cool to visit it this week. Thanks, Jim, for picking it, because like I said, it's just been sitting. I mean, what's up with this? Pretty much sums up just how stupid the lyrical content is. For someone to say, yep, that artwork is going on the inside of our CD. Absolutely. I mean, come on. But yeah, anyway, good pick. C+, B- for me. And I'm picking for next week. And I've been threatening to do this forever, and we're doing it.
All right.
Sinister, Cross the Sticks. Listen to this on the way home from Grand Rapids. This album absolutely destroys. It's so good. Where the lines between thrash metal, riff salad, and death metal meet, this is where this album lives. So, yeah, hopefully, Ben, you can join us again next week if you'd like to talk about Cross the Sticks. I was going to try to pick something challenging in a struggle, but I'm like, you know what? I want to listen to something fun this week. Again, you know, we're going to have a good run of listening to fun before we go off into some goofy shit. So,
I had to check. I do have this. This is one of those you rant about a whole lot, and I always mean to grab a copy of it, and it looks like I did. I'm not super familiar with it, so I can't wait to dig into it and be on next week.
It crushes. Absolutely crushes. What were you going to say, Jim?
And for something that doesn't crush, make sure you let TJ know that Leprous is coming to my town next month.
Are you going? Are you going to go?
No.
Who are they playing with?
Who cares?
Yep. Well, cool, man. It was good to see everybody in the chat tonight. Good turnout. Hopefully, if you went to Maryland Death Fest, you had a safe, fun time and had a good time. Looks like it was a good show. Tons and tons of people. And please go check out Eihwaz Recordings. Link in the description. Go buy yourself some stuff. Go check out Brainsmasher on YouTube for a bunch of good shit. And he's also go join his Patreon. He throws a bunch of fun stuff on there as well. But
the new episode of my podcast coming up on Saturday. All
Smashcast
metal.
Smashcast. Awesome. On Spotify. And Friday, show notes. I know Rick from the Dreadful Minutes will be on. We'll be doing a What's Spinning because we needed a break. Something easy. And, last week we did a fun little Iron Maiden experiment where we each made a playlist. I put up the playlist on Spotify. Go check out the links in the description for that episode to listen to what myself, Alan, and Dwayne Lazarus picked for our 80 minutes of Maiden. We can never hear any other Maiden together than these 80 minutes worth of songs. So it was a fun experiment. It was kind of like a weird take on Keep a Reap. But, yep, that's it, everybody. Anybody have anything to add before we get out of here?
Yeah, one question for those in the chat. Should I go see Wasp in a couple of months? I hear that Blackie is occasionally using backing tracks in the vocals. I don't know. Should I? He's playing the debut from beginning to end, the entire album. So that's the thing. It's like, I love that record, but if I'm going to...
Have you ever seen him before?
I've not.
Dude, you got to go. I'm going to bypass the chat. I'm going to say, even if it's, Seth says no. Wade says yes.
Says yes.
I mean, how many more years does Blackie have doing this? Wade saw him 2 years ago, and again, if he's lip syncing part of it, it's still gonna rule. It's still gonna be cool. You know,
Drink some beers, you won't notice.
you won't notice. He'll be head banging and air guitaring the whole time.
I'll get my wife to drop me off and pick me up, and that way I can just drink it out.
Yep. Okay, I'd still go see Wasp. Right on.
All right, thanks, Frosty. Yeah,
I
thanks
think,
everybody's opinions because I'm struggling with it.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's the logistics for me. Like, do I got to work in the morning? Is it a long drive? Is it in the same town I live? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. It was good hanging with you all tonight, and we will see you Friday. Oh, there's also a review coming up. Sue did a Nocturnus review, which I need to get edited and up this week. So that's coming. So get ready for that. And that's it. We'll see you all Friday. Bye.
Bye-bye.